I was researching a little bit about you on the internet and on Facebook in particular, and I found that your background actually you started in with theater, and after that you started with filming, and after that, as I understood, there were a lot of projects with innovative projection mapping projects, and the first one with the TED Talk in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, there were such customers as clients like Nike and Budweiser and Ubisoft, and you spent some time living in Spain and in China. And eventually, nowadays, you're working and building an immersive medical education platform right now in Harvard in Boston,
Mm-hmm.
and on and on and on. And AI body language software is just, it's so impressive, to be honest. It's just mind blowing. And what I thought to myself, seems like you're very creative first. And second, you're very talented. So
Well,
my first question will be, what's your strangest talent? How do you think?
my strangest talent.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Strange is such a, I don't know, it's such a broad word. It could mean so many things. Strangest talent.
What it means for you.
I can't think of any strange talents. I mean, there's lots of things that inspire and motivate me that are outside of the creative and technology world. Strange talent. I can't think of anything strange.
Okay, fine. Then let's skip this question. And I would like to ask you, could you share your path a little bit with me and with our listeners so they will understand how a person like you were shaped and developed into who you are currently?
Sure. Well, I started, it's been sort of a long winding path for me. I tend to have a bit of a short attention span. So I like to get into projects, get really heavy, really deep into them, master them as much as I can. And then I look for something new to challenge and to pursue. So initially I worked producing like small town theater for a while with a friend of mine. And we did that for a few years. Then we got into producing concerts and stuff as well. So my path sort of split in two directions at that point, where I started directing live concert videos. So I've been doing that for almost 3 decades. So multi-camera shoots on stages, and I have everyone from Bon Jovi to the Black Eyed Peas to Justin Timberlake and AC/DC. And so I've been doing that for 30 years. And every now and then I sort of swerve back into that path, and I'll direct a few shows and then sort of get back on my regularly scheduled program. I'm a musician. I started playing violin when I was 3 years old. So I was sort of always loved music and had a little bit of a synesthetic crossover where I always thought music was very visual. So I ended up going to film school after my little tryst with theater, because I love theater, but I realized that it's something that you can do that you'll never make any money at. So I figured my closest path to pursue was film, where you're still telling stories, you're still creating a visual and visceral experience for an audience, but there's more of a market there to actually make a living at it. So I went to film school and started a production company while I was in school. We did primarily music videos because, again, back to my music and film fusion, that's sort of a through line in a lot of the projects I build. So started doing music videos, a couple of commercials. We shot some documentaries and a few TV pilots that didn't take off, but great experience anyways. So at that point, with the music videos, I got really intrigued with the special effects. I loved, because again, it's this sort of challenge. It's like, let's figure out how to do something that nobody's done before, or no one's quite done it this way before. So I enjoyed that element of producing film more than the politics of dealing with record label executives and the artists' egos and all of that stuff. So sort of swerved again a little bit there, and we started focusing more on the special effects side of things. And did that for a while, again, sort of shooting concerts and stuff on the side. And then after that, I was obsessed with TED Talks. This was a little over a decade ago, and just binge watched them over and over and over again. And so I tracked down the local chapter in Toronto that was producing the conference there, and I said, "Listen, I've got tons of experience shooting multi-camera shoots for awards shows and concerts and things like that. Is there any way that you would have a spot for me to come in and do that for you guys? Just because I want to be involved, because I love the brand and I love the sentiment behind everything." So so they were like, "We've already got our crew that we used last year, and we've already got that lined up. But is there anything else? Like, we love your excitement and your passion and your eagerness to participate." So that morning, I had seen some YouTube clips with projection mapping, and it was in its infancy. I don't think it was even called projection mapping yet. There was a group in the UK, I can't remember, and a group from, I think, Berlin that was doing it. So there's only a few people that were actually doing it. Anti-VG, I think, was one of them, and I can't remember the second. So they really pioneered the idea of controlling projection over the contours of physical space. For people who don't know what projection mapping is, a lot of times you'll see it on the facade of large buildings, and they'll project scenes and change the shape and contours and play shows and have sort of special effects, live special effects, essentially, projection-based special effects in reality. So I told the TED Talks people, I was like, "Okay, how about this projection map video set?" And so I showed them the YouTube clips, and they were like, "That's incredible! Like, can you do that?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I had three months of panic to try to figure out, because at that point it was so new. There's no tutorials, there's no software, there's no references, there's no how-to kind of documentation. So spent a few months just calculating the optical distortion over distance based on the focal length of the lens of the projection, and using all kinds of math that I never thought that I would ever have to use again. And just sort of hoped it was going to work. It was just sort of like, it made sense, but until we could actually practically try it. So we set up the stage, the audience comes in, and so what the set was basically, it was a backdrop with tiers of steps with guitars and body busts and stacks of books and old typewriters and a bunch of curious sort of TED Talks-ish sort of miscellaneous items. And then I had taken photographic references of them, and then spray painted everything white so it was reflective for the projection, and then reprojected back the original look of the guitar onto the guitar and the typewriter on the typewriter. So it just looked like a regular set. And then eventually what we started doing is having the colors melt and sort of drip down the set, and have the guitar started to play, and then notes would fly up, and then the typewriter started typing, and the words would float over into the books, and the books would open up, and et cetera, et cetera. So it was this sort of, so at partway through the day, the guys that were producing the TED Talks event, the committee pulled me aside, and they said, "Can you turn that down somehow? Can you make it less dynamic, because people are watching your set and they're not listening to the TED Talks?" So at that point I was hooked. I was like, this is incredible to be able to, and because it was such a new technology at that time, nobody in the audience had ever seen it before. So they were just like, they didn't know what was happening. It was like, and so that got me hooked. And I did that for a few years, and then I ended up moving to Montreal in Canada, because it has a really vibrant technology and arts community there that's really well supported, both from the grants community as well as the public community. They really love their arts there. So I was there for a while. I did a lot of stuff with big artists, like we ended up doing an installation at one of the major clubs in Montreal. And we had like people like Skrillex and Tiesto and a bunch of sort of big European DJs come through. So the one project that we did there that was really fun was with, I think it was the Skrillex one. So we had a camera inside the club, and then we projection mapped the facade of the club, and we had it look like the walls opened up, and then you could see through the wall because of our camera that was feeding us into the club, and you could watch the show from out on the patio. So we did that for a while, and then I ended up through that, we got interviewed on a show, a Spanish TV show somehow tracked us down and was interviewing the artists of Montreal that were creating this scene. And so the producer of that met this British girl in Miami who was producing a big show in Ibiza, and she wanted some sizzle. So he introduced us to her, and like I think a week and a half later, I was on a plane to Spain, and I ended up living there for several months in the mountains in a beautiful mansion with some incredible artists. She basically packed her house with artists from around the world, like contortionists and fire jugglers, and world's body language or body painting champion from South Korea, and just all kinds of people were there creating the series of events and parties. And so I got to work with some really incredible people there, and people that I'm still in touch with now. And then that got me my job in China. Just going back to, when you were introducing, I worked in China with an incredible group. They were producing a Broadway style musical there. So Broadway style musicals were getting really trendy in China. And so they pulled in a team of international specialists to mentor them through the process of how they would stage a proper Broadway style musical. Mm-hmm. So I luckily made the list somehow through people that I had met when I was in Ibiza. And it was Tony Award winning directors and stage designers and a Broadway or a choreographer from LA that did like Moulin Rouge and a bunch of award winning shows there. We're working with the European lighting designer from Cirque du Soleil, et cetera. So it was a really great group of people, and we put on this show. And we had holographic screens flying in and out, and projection map moving sets, and a big video wrap around. I called it my video sandwich because I had basically video wrapping the entire cast, and incredible, unlimited budget pretty much. And they just, whatever we dreamed up, they provided for us. So that was really great as well. And so then that was sort of, then I landed back in Montreal, started working in augmented reality. One of my clients is Ubisoft. Who's been really good to me as well. I started projection mapping for them for their big video game launches. So they like to do big spectacles. And so we'd have the characters climbing up the walls of the building as you're going into the event, and stuff happening around the space, and things like that. So they, after the first few jobs we did with them, they sort of gave me creative reign. They said, here's the game, here's what we want to do. Like, what do you think we could do with this? And so they were launching a game called Watch Dogs that was basically a mobile-based game. So the lead character hacks everything in the city with his phone. So we're like, let's see if we could do something with mobile. And that's when I got turned on to augmented reality. Mm-hmm. So I went online and I tracked down a team of developers, a really great crew. Alexandra Slezareva from Ukraine was the lead. And I've worked with her a handful of times. So they're from the Ukraine, from Odessa. Mm-hmm. So incredible team. I was just chatting with her earlier about some new stuff that I'm working on as well, and hopefully we can work on something new again. So we built an augmented reality app for the launch event, where there was like hidden triggers around the room where you would go, almost a little bit of an Easter egg treasure hunt, interact with the actual physical space and unlock certain characters and levels and stuff. And then so I kind of got hooked on augmented reality. I thought, wow, this is awesome. And then I put my projection mapping to the side and stepped into some new shoes. And from that, just started building interactive apps. We have interactive like coloring books, and trying to figure out, was trying to sell it before its time. We had tons of meetings with all kinds of marketing agencies and educators and stuff, and nobody could see, they didn't understand the technology. They didn't see the potential of it. So I was kind of spinning wheels there. And then, so I took a sideways step back into sort of more of my traditional film side of things, and tried out this new virtual reality stuff that was happening. So me and a partner of mine at the time, we put together a GoPro rig. So we had 7 GoPros in a 3D model, and we had downloaded, there was a open source model provided by a company from Amsterdam called Purple Pill. So they went through, did a lot of heavy R&D, and then opened it up to everybody in the world, and really helped people step in and troubleshoot and make it work. So I started shooting 360 videos with that. Did a couple things back into the music side. We ended up shooting some VR stuff for concerts in the early days, and then been sort of bouncing around with that and some augmented reality and some virtual reality, and then so about a year and a half ago, I got introduced to a group from Harvard. So there's three surgeons that were looking into creating virtual reality training modules to help their students learn and experience surgical procedures and understand the nature of the OR and stuff before actually stepping into those roles. So it was about a year and a half in the works, but we're now in talks with the deans at Harvard about creating an immersive training platform that will hopefully become sort of a standard piece of their curriculum for their education. And as well on the side, I'm heading to Austin, Texas tomorrow. We're shooting some training for a medical equipment company called Abbott. They're a massive global medical manufacturing company. So we're working with them to build some training modules to train people specifically on some of their procedures and their actual hardware and their tools that they've used.
It's incredible technology.
And on the side of that, we're building a virtual production studio in Toronto. We're working on some television shows, but primarily there's it's a projection studio in Toronto. It's basically a 360-degree projection theater that's showcasing an immersive showcase of Van Gogh. That originally was produced for a place in Paris, but they bought it up and they brought it to Toronto now. Mm-hmm. So I've been working with them since they've got its 52 HD projectors in the space, wrapping all the walls and the floor in video, and millions of pixels, and so they have this one show, and so they need to develop more programming. So we're in collaboration with them. We did a showcase of an opera singer, Amber Braid, about 3 weeks ago. She's one of the German soprano leads from Frankfurt. So we got her to come perform in Toronto, and we built this visual set that sort of wrapped around her and the audience. So the audience isn't looking at the set, they're in the set. So it's this really immersive, incredible performance space. So that went well. So now we're working on building some more shows. And I just had a call earlier with some dancers that we're working on potentially building a show for the spring that's hopefully going to be quite incredible as well. So that's what I got going on.
Wow. That's a lot of things going on, and all of them are awesome and incredible. And I have a couple of questions to you.
Sure.
While you were talking, I thought to myself, what drives you? How do you think? Because it takes enormous amounts of energy, I believe, to do that. It's a creative process, and I'm more than sure you are facing, like all of us, maybe not a lot of, but some challenges on your way. What drives you so you pursue what you want?
I get excited about ideas. I get excited about challenges, and I get excited about the idea of pursuing things that maybe nobody's done before, or approaching things in a unique and creative way. And I'm just stubborn. If I get something in my head and I'm like, that seems like a good idea to me, then I just believe it is, and I can't see it any other way. So I pursue it. Like I can't not. It's just a stubbornness, I guess. It's just I need to, if it gets in my head and I get the idea. And a lot of the times, I hit brick walls and it doesn't go through. There's, for every success, there's been 100 failures or dead ends. So it's not all just easy and work and go. It's a lot of times there's a lot of frustration and convincing people to see things the way you do. And a lot of times when you're working in technology that's cutting edge and sort of more advanced than what most people are used to either creating or consuming, it's a challenge to convince them. Or first of all, you have to educate them. The first step is always here's the format and here's why it has value. And then on top of that, it's almost a double layered sales pitch. And then you're like, and then here's what we're going to do inside that medium. So yeah, just stubbornness and ambition to do something interesting and creative, and yeah.
I'm just curious why it's so important for you to create something new which nobody did before you. Well, why it's so important for you to create new things? I'm sorry for a lot of questions, but that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I've never really sort of stepped back and it's just the way I've always done things. I've always been just sort of bullheaded and pursued sometimes ludicrous things that were outside the realm of even, possibility. And some of the stuff that we're working on now as well with the IMET team, which is imetvr.com, is the immersive medical education technology.
Yes.
So with that, we're currently producing passive view 360 videos. So it's 3 degrees of freedom where you can look around, but you can't interact and you can't move through the space. Yeah. So I'm really pushing the team here, and they're all my partners are surgeons. So they're any little bit of technology to them is exciting and new and innovative. And I'm like, but there's all these other things that we can step into, that we can move towards. So I've been chatting. There's a group called Precision OS from Vancouver. They've created interactive surgical simulations. So you actually go in and perform surgeries in VR, and but it's all animated, and so it doesn't feel. And you're using your hand controllers for VR, so it's not a real surgical sort of sensation. So I've been talking to. I do a lot of conferences and panels and stuff as well. I love talking about technology and all kinds of things that are immersive and new. So I was at a panel in Silicon Valley, Augmented World Expo, on some panels out there a couple of years ago, and I met this company, CTO from the company called Tesla Suit. So they have a full body haptic suit. They do sensation. So in immersive media, you can actually feel as you're interacting with the space. So they've come out with a new haptic glove that actually gives your hand sensation. So there's a high resolution haptic resolution fingers, so you can actually feel what you're touching. But it also has attenuators that pull back on your finger, so it creates resistance. So if you grab your coffee cup, you actually can't close your hands. It creates enough resistance to stop that. Or you can like squish like a marshmallow, right? Like you can feel the different textures. So I've been talking with them about sort of fusing those technologies, the interactive surgical simulation, with these actual haptic gloves, so you can feel and get a sense of if you're cutting through muscle or tissue, or if you hit the bone, you actually get resistance. And to take those two technologies, put them together, and then bring in a third group of friends of mine from Toronto. They've got a company called Occupied VR, and they've done a lot of photogrammetry. So they're scanning photorealistic 3D environments. Yeah. So bring them in to capture the surgical forum, and then create a photorealistic environment where then you have, and then bring in the haptics with the physical resistance and marry that in with the surgical simulation. So that way you have a very much a realistic emulation of what a surgery could be. And so we're shooting in Austin, we're shooting in a cadaver lab, and something I never thought of, cadavers are quite expensive. So for medical students to go and train, I think it's like $25,000 per cadaver or something like that. So if we can go in and recreate that in a simulation scenario where it's free, and then unlimited people can go and you can try your surgery 1,000 times, then that becomes, of extreme value to them. And as well, one thing is that with these haptic gloves, they track your motion. So they're motion trackers. And so you can record essentially when you do the surgery, and then what we can do is we can do a visual overlay. We can take an expert surgeon, get them to perform the procedure inside our system, then we can record them. So then for other surgeons who are training on that system, they can have a ghosted over version of the surgeon's hands and sort of match their rhythm and match their movement. So
that's awesome. That's incredible.
Yeah.
With all this said, how do you think, what's the future of immersive technologies? Let's say, what's going to happen in 50 years and
15? Yeah, well, there's a bunch of stuff that's happening. Everyone's got their opinions on what the timelines are, but I think it's the outcomes are inevitable. There's going to be an extremely rich and very realistic immersive world, virtual space that you can retreat to. There's a futurist, what's his name, Gray Scott, who has a show on YouTube called Futurist Now, I believe. And he's got a bunch of really interesting ideas. And I think he's a little bit ambitious about the timelines, but he's suggesting that kids that are being born now will almost have a schizophrenic life, where they have the physical real world that they're in, and like Ready Player One, and then they're going to have their second life in this VR world where they can sort of retreat and become whoever they want, and they can control the actual environment. And since the quality of VR is getting better and better, it will be almost as real to them as the physical world. So, and as time goes on, people will be spending more time, especially now with, we're seeing with COVID where people have to maintain distance. There is much more like this, virtual conversations, not in VR, but, where people are interacting digitally so much more now than they ever have. So once the virtual reality world becomes more robust as well, then I think that there's going to be more and more of that. That'll be a regular part of your day, is to pop into VR. And
that's interesting what you mentioned, because I was interviewing a couple of years actually ago another expert in VR, and he said that his projections were very cheerful at first, and he was like all for VR technology and all other immersive technologies. And after that, he started to study it more closely and he said that there are a lot of downsides of this kind of technologies. Do you see what are these downsides, and what do we do with this? Because I imagine that we as humans, we are shaped with the reality which is around us too, because there is such a thing as epigenetics too. So in extreme cases, I think the artificial reality can change even our DNA. So whom do we become, and all the other questions. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think it depends on how much science fiction you've read or watched. I mean, I think that we're getting to a position where that's actually, we're on the threshold with artificial intelligence, and with a lot of the implications that's. I think we're on the threshold of a really profound change that technology is going to provide, and it depends. People say that, artificial intelligence will be evil and it'll try to destroy humanity. But what I think the reality of that is that the technology isn't evil; it's the people that are controlling it. So it's the humans that we have to worry about, not the technology. So, with anything, you could create a technology for communication or whatever, and then it becomes a military tool, right? Or it becomes a pornography takes over, and you know what I mean? It doesn't matter what the intention of the people who build the technology is. It will for some way get twisted into a tool for some sort of corruption. So it's that's inevitable, I think. There's stuff like Neuralace with Elon Musk, who's building a brain computer interface, and he's very open about the fact that he thinks that AI is a dangerous thing, and if we don't tether to it, then we'll lose control of it. Mm-hmm. So that's a potential sort of stream of technology moving forward as well, that may or may not become prevalent. And there's the sort of anti-technology people that are like, I'll never chip myself, or I'll never put in but if you don't, then you don't benefit. It's like saying I won't have a cell phone or internet because I don't believe in this or evil technology. If you don't have those tools, then you can't succeed, because the world is so tied to them. So likewise, I think moving forward with these augmentations, these digital augmentations of humans, I think people are even going to start physically augmenting themselves. There was that runner, Olympic runner a while ago that lost his legs. Then he had the scoop, the design scoop things that gave him an advantage. So because of his disability of being amputated, having amputated legs, he had an advantage in his sport, and he ended up getting banned because he had this unfair advantage as an amputee, right? And then so there was a study done, and they interviewed a lot of the other athletes and asked them if they would do the same, if they would intentionally cut off their limbs to get an advantage in their sport, if they could put on sort of like bionic legs or some sort of hyperhuman limbs. And most of them said yes, at these high level competitive, they're anything for an advantage, right? So I think that as there's potentially going to be that stuff, and there's thought controlled limbs now, right? Thought controlled prosthetics. So you tap it in and you train your muscles and you think, and then you can move your arm, and they're actually getting feedback where you can feel what you're touching and stuff. So that whole side of things is getting really, innovative as well. And they're 3D printing organs, and, like all these things, all of this technology that feels so science fiction is actually happening now, and very, very near to becoming a prominent part of our daily lives. And so I think that, with all of those things happening, right? Like, and then, so if we have a brain computer interface, you don't need virtual reality. You can just sort of digitally simulate, augment your reality, I guess it would be, but simulate those elements directly. Just load in that experience that you want.
Do you think it will polarize our society?
It will which?
Polarize. I mean, there will be like a couple of different sides, because that's how I feel about that, because change is never easy.
Yeah.
And there are people who are stretching themselves for the sake of growing and developing. Like you said somewhere, that if you do not test your limits, you're wasting your time.
Yeah, if you don't push your limits, you're wasting your time. Yeah, that's been my motto since day one. Yeah. I think with everything too, like I started running a few years ago, like 10 years ago or so. And so instead of signing up for a 5K race, I signed up for a marathon, because if I'm going to do something, I want to do it all the way, and I want to push the limits to what I'm participating in. And I mean, not everybody shares that sentiment, but I think people who push those limits, there's a country in, is it Norway or Sweden, where people are chipping themselves, and they're basically RFID chips that they use as their bank card or to unlock their doors. And it's just hundreds of thousands of people are doing that, right? Like, it's just that's just like, why wouldn't you do that? Because it's so convenient. And there's other people that thinks that that's terrifying, right? I was talking about that to somebody the other day, because I always keep forgetting my passwords on all my logins. So if I could just like tap it with my implanted chip and unlock everything, then for sure I would do that. So, but like you said, it is a polarizing thing. Some people are super excited about technology and how quickly can we implement it and enhance our lives with it. And then other people are like more traditional, where they think that it's some sort of, I don't know, some sort of beast, some sort of monster that we're unleashing. But I'm very much a futurist. I believe in the power of technology to enhance human lives. And there are, like I said, there's going to be some negative side effects. There's even with just internet, there's addiction issues where people are on social media, like, and then you have these strange social trends like on TikTok, and like just these are things that are going to happen. But I think that overall the total sum of it is a positive. Like, the more that technology evolves, it is evolving to enhance our lives, to make things easier, to make things better, to make things more equitable, hopefully at some point, and to give access. The stuff that we're working on in the education world is to be able to remotely access high-level academic content, to be able to learn from some of the best people in the world. It doesn't matter where you are, to have access to that, I think is important. And there's interesting stuff like you see in India and stuff, where people will have cell phones that don't have power, so they'll go down to the train station and charge up their phones, but they're learning English and they're learning computer like coding skills and stuff, while living in some remote area that would never ever have access otherwise. So there's technology for sharing information, for educating people equally, as long as people don't use it as a tool to enhance a certain class of people and give them sort of exclusive access to it, and then just keep everybody else away from it. Then as long as we share the technology openly, then that's the goal.
That's interesting. And while you were talking, this thought came into my mind. Will you share with us your mission? What is your mission in life overall?
My mission? Well, I was thinking about that quite deeply. I spent some time on a Buddhist monastery last year. I went in for a retreat and lived in the woods at a Thai forest tradition monastery. And ended up going back after I talked to the abbot and talked him into, because it's no technology. It's a very quiet, humble spot out in the woods. And so I convinced him to let me bring my virtual reality, my 360 camera back, and go and shoot meditation series in and around the monastery. But sorry, that's a sidelight tangent. And so every now and then I'll pop on my headset, and it's like I'm sitting back beside the beaver pond in this serene monastery in the middle of the woods. But my mission, my goal, try to define that. And it's sort of because I am sort of all over the place, but I think primarily I'm what I would classify as an experientialist. I believe that life is finite, that we have this moment that we're however long it is, and then just the value I think in life, it comes from the experiences that you have, and the stories you can tell, and the moments that you create for other people as well as yourself. So I've moved constantly my whole life. I've never lived in the same city for more than a couple of years. I was tallying it up. I think I've had over 250 roommates now. I've lived in tons of cities all over the place. And just constantly jumping. Most of my work is project based. So I get to do one project and then I'm like, okay, now what? And then, so I get to bounce around. And because of my short attention span and OCD, that's perfect for me. And then, so I get to sort of redesign my life every few months and go like, okay, that was a great project. Now that we're done that, who do I want to be? Where do I want to be? What do I want to do? And why do I want to do it? So it's sort of every however long the projects are, I get to reinvent myself and to explore a new life almost. It's like, okay, now I'm going to be a director for a while, or now I'm going to be an editor, or now I'm going to go live in London or Copenhagen or wherever. Yeah.
That's interesting. And I would like also to ask you about your legacy, because a lot of times, a lot of people nowadays are talking about legacy. And I believe that each and every one of us has his or her own understanding of this legacy. So what's legacy is for you, first of all? How do you think?
I've done a lot of crazy things in my life, but I don't know if anything has been legacy level yet. I think whatever my legacy will be is yet to come. It's still on the horizon. I haven't figured out what that is, but yeah, I don't think there's any one focused thing. I don't have a mission. I don't have an objective. I want people to remember me as the guy who whatever, or I don't have that focused of an ambition to change anything in any profound way.
Okay, so it's more go with the flow and experience.
Very much, yeah, very much so.
That's cool. Okay, and you also mentioned that life is about stories. So if your life would be, and it is, an ultimate story of yours, what would be the name of your story, of your life?
You've got good questions, and I'm a very slow, thorough thinker, so I'm not very good at coming up. It's like, oh, here's an answer. If it's something I haven't thought about previously, then I'll email you in a week, and I'll be like, oh, I just thought of the answer to that question. I just figured it out. The title.
Yeah, the first one which comes into your mind. Just go with the flow, like you usually do.
The tales of failed ambition. Because it doesn't matter how much you achieve, there's always more that you can do. So there's always whatever. Doesn't matter how rich you are, you're always thinking about how you can get richer. It doesn't matter how much you've done, you're always thinking about the next project and where you're going next. So I think that it doesn't matter how far I get. I don't think I'll ever go like, okay, I'm done. And I think I'll be like, oh, you know what else we could do? And like my friends, I'll call them up and I'll say, oh, so I've got this idea. And that's sort of almost a lot of my conversations start with that. And they're like, oh, here we go again. It's like, how long do I need? How long do I need to listen to your idea this time?
Actually, it's a very familiar situation for me. So, okay. And you mentioned failure. So I would like to ask your opinion on what failure is, because a lot of people, they sort of stuck. They failed once and they stuck forever. And a lot of people are like that, unfortunately. So I would like to understand, and for people who are listening to us, so they can understand what failure actually means for you.
I guess that's a good question. Failure is a subjective word. I think most lessons, most things that I've learned the most from is what would be classified as failure, when you do something and it doesn't work. So you can take the word failure and turn it around and call it a lesson, right? I think all failures, if you have the capability to shift your perspective and look at it as a lesson, not as a dead end, but as an opportunity to learn and pivot. In Taoism, there's some really great proverbs, but there's, you don't, as water, you don't try to flow through the rock, you flow around it. So when you hit a hard point, that's not the end. That's just a moment for you to learn and to sort of flow around it and find a new path and reshape what your original idea was. But there are people that do hit that rock and they just keep banging onto it. Yeah. I think it's a lesson until you keep doing it over and over again. Then it becomes a failure. If you don't learn from it and you don't correct your path, then I think that becomes a failure.
Yeah, that's true. I believe this too. Could you please share with us, how do you support your creativity? Because you are creative, like a lot, big time. So how do you do this? How do you support? Do you have any tricks, or it's just sort of natural, again, as a flow?
Yeah, I find it's always terrifying every time I start a new project, because you end up with a bit of a blank canvas and you're like, okay, now what? And then you sit there and you can stare at a blank page forever, and it's just so intimidating. And then you fall into cycles of, I have nothing. You can't force creativity. It's one of those things that you can't just work harder and then it happens. It's something that is inspired. So for me, most of the time, I call it kinetic meditation. For me, when I'm running, I go out, I turn off all devices, I leave my phone at home, and I'll just go off wherever I am. I try to find some woods or some wilderness where I can just go sort of like run like a wild man through the wilderness. And that's always for me when the clarity comes. It's because if I'm sitting, like now, I've got 4 screens in front of me. And there's a Ubisoft video game launch going on over here, and I'm watching the thing over there, and I got my phone, so there's so much distraction in a regular environment. And I got VR headsets, and there's just too much stimulation if I'm in a home environment or an office environment. It's just, and so I can never think clearly. So when I go to work, I don't sit down at a computer and work. I'll usually take a pad of paper and pencil and just start doodling or scratching ideas or just writing down words just at random. And then just sort of slowly but surely things generally take shape somehow. But everybody works differently. Like I know some people that will go and, anything, like everybody has their own process. And I don't think there's a universal. There's people, you can buy books, the 10 tricks to creative success, but I think it's an individual process. So,
okay. And what do you share with us, please? What is the most valuable resource of yours as an entrepreneur, apart from creativity, or maybe it is creativity? What is the most valuable resource? How do you think?
I think confidence is one thing that has to be a foundation for anybody who's trying to with any creative pursuit or doing anything innovative, because you have to convince people, first of all, that you know what you're doing. Back when I was directing music videos, my sort of mentor who helped me into the market, he, on my first day of directing, he told me, he's like, if somebody asks you a question, give them an answer and stick by it and be confident, because as soon as they start questioning your authority, your creative authority on set, then everything sort of goes, falls apart. So So my thing is I like to research and know and pre-plan because, like I said, I'm a slow, thorough thinker. So if something happens and I have to react to it, it's sometimes that's challenging for me. So I over prepare, I over research, and so I have a plan in place. And then so I think that's important is that you don't just go and go like, oh yeah, I'm a virtual reality producer, and you don't know what you're doing. I mean, you can have all the confidence in the world, but you also have to, you have to dedicate yourself to understand the technology. And for me, I read all kinds of tech blogs. The technology is changing day to day. Like if you don't keep up with the ever emerging technology, you kind of fall behind really quickly. And my business partners here in Boston, with the surgical stuff, they don't quite understand that yet. I'm trying to educate them on the fact that technology isn't static; it's constantly evolving. So they're like, "Oh, we need," we were talking about some innovative ideas, and they're like, "Oh, can we have that in 3 weeks?" I'm like, "Well, no, that's, you can't create a whole new technology in 3 weeks. That's 16 months, right?" So they're slowly catching up to speed with that. But I think as an entrepreneur, you have to educate yourself as much as you can, and I think through that knowledge, if you properly give yourself those tools, then that helps to enhance your confidence as well. You go into your meetings, you go into your pitches, and you're putting together your products with confidence because you've done your homework and you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's true. Preparation is the best thing to do. Okay, could you please share with us what are your goals for the next 5 years, business wise, and maybe you would want to share personal goals too?
Personal goals. Well, let me see. Um, want to get a six pack. I want a girlfriend. 5 years. Okay, 5 years. I mean, ideally, there's a few projects that I'm working on. I want, because it's been challenging, especially this year with COVID sort of stripping away a lot of the projects that I've been developing. There's a lot of financial challenges sometimes when you're developing projects, because you have to work 6 days a week, 20 hours a day to get things off the ground. And in those bootstrapping initial stages, you generally don't have any income. So now that and I ended up sort of landing in the development stage on a whole bunch of projects simultaneously. So all of my work went into developing projects that didn't have any money coming in. So we're on the back end turn of that now, where money's finally starting to come in. So in 5 years, there's a couple of things. Able, which I'm working on, artificial intelligence body language, is I think hopefully we'll be able to get that up, get it to market, and then have an exit strategy, multi-million-dollar sale to Google or something. And that's, then I would buy a boat and sail away and find something else to do somewhere else in the world. That would be a nice 5 years if I could sell a couple of these, the software stuff that we're building, and then maybe take a bit of a break. I still have ambitions as a filmmaker. I've got a couple of screenplays I've been writing that I want to finish and produce. So maybe get that started as well. Back on track.
That's exciting. Okay. Thank you for sharing. And you mentioned that in the first stages of any project, like when it starts up, there is no or a little of financial, how do you call it? Payoff, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Payoff. So, but I would like to ask you, what again keeps you going? Because a lot of people, I see times and times again, people are coming saying, I tried 10 or 17 kind of businesses and they never work.
Yeah.
I tried for a year or for 6 months. They never work. So I'm just curious, what is that you're telling to yourself that you're able to follow through?
Again, it comes back to me because I'm stubborn, and and the stuff that I'm building, I believe, has value. So there's a sense of dedication that it's not just some sort of selfish gain, that there is actually value, either on the entertainment side, where I believe in the concept of the show, and I think it'll be in, engaging experience for the audience, or with some of the technology stuff, or some of the, the programs that we're building. I think that there's a reason for them to exist. And I think that if you're, if you believe in what you're doing as an entrepreneur, that should be fuel enough for you to weather the hard times. And I've had hard times. I've been homeless. I've been, relied on generosity of friends and family to give me a couch for a while, and while waiting for those moments where things start to pay off. And that it's not ideal. And some people go a different route. They'll I'm not a terribly great business person. I'm more, idea and passion is what I bring to the table. So, some people will go and get a venture capitalist and go that route. I would rather, the problem I have with that route, and we're talking to some potentially for one of the things I'm working on, but, is that you're giving up equity and you're giving up control, which, I don't mind about the equity. I don't really care about money. That's never been my goal with anything. But it's that control that they can then go like, okay, well, I gave you $10 million. So I don't care what you think. Here's how we're going to take a left turn because there's more value that way. Right. So I'd rather maintain the control and then have less money in the bank to work with.
Yeah. I have two more questions before we finish our interview. Okay. I would like to ask you, you mentioned monastery. Just wondering what you were searching there. So it was sounds for me like a pretty well thought through decision to go there, what you were looking for.
Yeah, that's another one of my personality traits, is I'm actually quite impulsive. I was working at a music festival. I was directing a concert video for it. And one of my camera guys was like, hey, I stayed at this monastery. And it was a really interesting experience. And we were talking about Buddhism and theology and sort of the nature of soul. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll give it a go. So I went out and stayed for a month, and I had some really interesting talks with the abbot of the monastery, Ajahn Varadamo, who's Ajahn Chah was one of the sort of, he reignited the Thai forest tradition in Thailand. And then one of his mandates of his life was to spread Buddhism to the West and to make it less of a regional thing, and to open it up to the whole world. And so Ajahn Varadamo, who was the abbot that I was staying with, was one of three of Ajahn Chah's last disciples that are still alive. And so he was quite well informed, and so we had some really, really interesting talks. And he was obsessed, or he was really interested in technology, because that's so far outside of his realm of things. So we would go walk through the woods and talk about how technology is affecting humanity, and is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Similar to some of the things we talked about earlier, but what is the effect on the human soul? Was sort of his concern. Was he's thinking that people are so distracted, which I agree. There's just constant sort of you don't have a moment to just take a moment and be still. And I think that's the affliction of technology now, especially with social media stuff, where I do it all the time. If I'm just sitting here and I've got 2 seconds, I'll just pick it up and read a post or look at Instagram or something, right? So so the one interesting conversation I had with him was about the idea of soul, because he had given a talk that morning before we went out, and he was talking about the nature of soul not being internal, but it's an external force. It's a universal energy that attaches itself to our physical form while we're alive, and then it's released when we pass, and then takes another form. So I was talking with him about the idea of artificial intelligence, and the fact, if artificial intelligence can gain sort of human level intelligence, would it then be able to gain a soul? And the idea was that we're carbon based, computers are silicon based. So is this universal energy prejudiced enough to say that I'm only going to attach to carbon based intelligence? Why wouldn't it, if artificial intelligence achieves a conscious state, why then would a soul not technically be able to attach to a silicon based intelligence? And he stopped in his tracks and he turned around. He's probably 80, late 80s. And he turned around and he looked at me. He's like, Isaac, I've figured everything out in my life. I've reached enlightenment. He's like, I'm ready to pass. He's like, you've just posed a question that I don't have an answer for. And he's like, I don't know if I'm excited that I have to go and figure this out, or if I'm angry at you for like disturbing my serenity. So he says, you have to come back. He said, come back next year. He's like, we'll talk again. He's like, I have to think about this for a while. So that was something that I thought was quite interesting, is that concept is why, if the soul is external, why would it just be a biological thing, right? So, but yeah, no, it was relatively impulsive that I went there, and I'm really glad I did. And I've been back a few times, like I said, and the ability to just shut everything down and then be with yourself is, I think, an extremely important experience that most people don't have anymore. And I think that's one of back to the idea of, the challenges of technology, or some of the negative downsides. I think that's it, is that we don't have times to just sit and daydream and look at the clouds, or, just be with ourselves and be introspective.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing this. That's interesting. Actually, that's a lot of, I think I will spend some time thinking about this too today and tomorrow probably too. I have one final question for you for today. If you would have a superpower, what would be one thing you would want to change in the world? How do you think?
One change, that anything I could change in the world?
Yes, one thing.
Well, I think the vast level of inequality in the world. I've done a fair bit of traveling, and when you go to poor places in the world and you see just how different, and even the poorest person in North America that's complaining, oh, I'm living in poverty, has no idea what poverty really is, right? And so to be able to balance that out, I think, is something, and I think that should be, there are foundations, there are groups of people that are actively trying to do that, but it's such a monumental task to be able to level things out, so people have an equal stake in the world and equal opportunities to experience things. I mean, that's kind of like a cookie cutter, I'd say, beauty pageant kind of answer to that question, but I think it's true. I think that's the thing that is most broken about the world, that we should all somehow figure out how to fix.
Yes. Actually, that's one of the things I would fix too. I think this would make our world much more better.
And I think too, there's if all of the people and the talent in it, there could be a brilliant dancer or a brilliant writer or astrophysicist who's living in poverty, that's never going to have the opportunity to share those skills and those talents and those ideas and profound moments or extreme advances with the world, because they just don't have the opportunity. And I think if you look at the 7 billion people that there are now, and most of them are living in challenging times. If you were able to somehow give everybody that balanced playing field, then all of those brilliant talents and advances would come to the forefront. That just won't. If that doesn't change, then that's just lost forever.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you very much for your knowledge and your presence and your expertise and your insights. I enjoyed this time with you. I hope you enjoyed it too.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you so much. It's been fun.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay.